Hi, welcome at the Dutcham Orange Talks. My name is Peggy, and I'm here today with Karin, my colleague from Dutcham.
Hello,
Hi,
Peggy.
Karin. Here we are again. The Orange Talks, you know by now, it's a series of podcasts, and this time we're going to talk about COP30 and beyond, because there is much more than only the COP to talk about. We are going to talk about sustainability actions and much more. And today we are very happy that we have really a special guest with us in the studio today, because she's absolutely recognized as the leader in water. She has been providing to millions of people access to water and to sanitation. More than 25 years, she has been in top positions, also with, for example, the World Bank. And now today, she's been living, by the way, in different continents. She's not only from the Netherlands, but she's been living in continents like Africa and Asia as well. And now these days, she is responsible for all the international connections in water affairs, as they call it, fostering the bi and multilateral conversations for the Netherlands. She's the Water Envoy from the Netherlands, and I'm very happy and very proud that she was able to be with us in the studio here live in São Paulo. Give me a warm welcome to Meike van Ginneken.
Thank you very much.
And
Nice to be here.
nice to have you in the studio, and I feel a little bit lucky that I speak Dutch, because I think otherwise to pronounce your name is always a little bit complicated, I think, for the
My
Brazilians.
parents didn't think of an international career, I'm afraid.
Well, but it ended up as a really international career, right? Meg, can I call you Meg? By the way, God, okay. But once again, welcome. Fantastic to have you in our studio. Because Karin, we've been already talking with a few people here. Obviously, we talk about the COP30 because this is something that is coming up in short in November in Belém. But again, an enormous opportunity to talk to you, because we cannot talk about sustainability without talking about water. You've been arrived already in Brazil a few days now. Been exploring already. How is that so far?
Well, I arrived in Porto Alegre in Rio Grande do Sul a few days ago. And that was actually immediately a very intense experience. Because if you think about climate change and you think about the COP, you see the effects of climate change immediately. 15 months ago, there were horrible floods in Porto Alegre and in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. And we'd been working on it. I read reports about it. I've seen pictures of it, but being there is very different. Of course, the floods have receded, the water has receded, but you see on the walls how high the water came. And you talk to people, you talk to kids. They're afraid of the water. So you see that climate change is real. Climate change is now. Climate adaptation, adapting to a changing climate is urgent and now. And you see how bad the impact of climate change can be. So it's a very intense experience. And these COPs are big conferences and you talk about things, but what you realize is that ordinary people feel climate change through water because their house floods or because maybe the rains come late and they don't have a harvest, their kids go hungry. And that was a very intense way of arriving in Brazil and seeing the effects of climate change here.
I think even if you go there physically, I mean, we saw also the images, or a lot of people saw the images on the news. I mean, but it's still a little bit far away. But if you experience there, to be there on the spot, and probably it's something completely different. Why? By the way, talking about that, Meg, I think the Dutch have been involved from day one as well after all of this happened, right? I mean, the Dutch were very quickly there to provide the support and the knowledge they had, right?
Yeah, the Dutch, we have a lot of experience with floods, with avoiding floods, preventing floods, but also dealing with the aftermaths of floods. So we have a special team of specialists, which is actually on call to send to these kind of situations, not to help with clearing the rubble or doing the physical work, which of course is much better done by local people, by the mayor and the governor and his team, but to think about what do you need to do. So we send a team of specialists there who helped the state of Rio Grande do Sul to make a plan of what to do in the aftermath, in the short term, the medium term, but importantly also in the long term. How can you make sure this doesn't happen again with the same level of damages, the same number of deaths? And that's really what good water management under a changing climate is all about.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that on the short term, these kind of things can be prevented in a sense, thanks to technology, innovation? How do you see that on the short term evolving?
If we've learned one thing in the Netherlands is that water management is a very long-term endeavor. No, in the Netherlands we actually have a history of 8 centuries of water management, and we're now planning 100 years ahead. So you have to be careful to think what can you do in the short term, but some things also take a lot of time to plan, to implement, and also to find the money to pay for it. But there is a lot that you can do in the short term, and you shouldn't wait with the long term. You have to start now. So I think if you think about climate change and the effects of climate change, very often it's through water. That's how climate change manifests itself. And I think there are 3 things you need to do. You mentioned the first one, which is engineering and technology. And we really need to make sure that through sharing know-how, cities and governments and enterprises and citizens around the world have the best technology and engineering available. But we also know that technology and engineering is not enough.
We need more.
We need more. And let me mention 2 things. The first one is actually we need to make sure that we restore water storage in nature. Because what you see happening in a place like Rio Grande do Sul, when it rains, all the water comes at the same time. So we need to slow down the water. And that's by storing water. And you often have discussions about large dams and difficult infrastructure projects, but 99% of storage around the world, water storage around the world, is in nature. It's in wetlands, it's in lakes, it's in aquifers. So we need to really make sure that that's in order to slow down the water.
So it's not only about infrastructure.
It's not only about infrastructure. You need good engineers and hydrologists to restore wetlands, but it's really about green solutions. Sometimes you also need concrete and engineering solutions. And the third thing is you need to think about your spatial planning. You need to think where in the city do you put your canals? Are there areas in the cities that just will flood too often and probably people shouldn't live there? You shouldn't have industry there. Where do you put your agriculture? Where do you put your industry, your data centers? They need a lot of water. Probably you shouldn't put them in places where there's a shortage of water. So if you do your engineering, you do your water storage in nature, and you do your spatial planning, then we're ready to adapt to a changing climate.
And as you say, long term, right?
Long term. I was going to say, climate change is teaching us not only to look at a longer term planning, 100 years, as you were saying, but also to look more at nature as an ally and not only as something that needs to be controlled or turned into infrastructure.
Very true, and we've learned that the hard way in the Netherlands because, to be honest, we've fought water and we've been fighting nature for centuries. We just tried to drain the water to the sea. We built dikes, we canalized our rivers. We really saw water as the enemy. And I think only in the past 20-25 years, we've actually said, okay, we need to live with water. We need to work with nature, which is a very different way of thinking about how you do your water management, how do you do your climate adaptation.
Completely different. That's very interesting, Meike. Can you explain a little bit to us what the role of the Water Envoy is, and how do you see climate change as fostering opportunities of collaboration between countries in the times that we're living?
Yeah. So Water Envoy is a fantastic job. There's very few of us in the world. There's about 4 or 5 of us.
I think it started raining when you arrived here in São Paulo, right? We didn't have rain for weeks, but that's probably...
So the Water Envoy brings the rain, right?
I don't bring the rain. It also rained very much in Porto Alegre. I'm happy it doesn't always bring rain because then I would always be wet. But the Netherlands is a true water country. We have a long tradition. We have a lot of know-how. And that's why we have a Water Envoy in the Netherlands. Because we want to contribute with our know-how to solving the big problems on this world, to sustainability, to climate adaptation, to the sustainable development goals. But we also want to connect with other countries because we need to learn ourselves from other countries. We, for instance, have longer dry spells now. So we also need to think about how do we store water? How do we deal with less water sometimes? How do we deal with pollution? So there's very different ways that we also can learn from others. It's an important part of our diplomacy. We make friends to water. We're very much known as a water country, and it's part of our diplomatic network. And the last thing is we have a great water sector in the Netherlands, and we really like it when they work overseas. Of course, to gain some money, but maybe as importantly, because in order to maintain the best know-how about water in the Netherlands for our own benefit, it's very important that these companies work overseas. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Singapore, and Dutch companies are building a polder there. We want to maintain that knowledge in our Dutch sector. And we don't do that so often in the Netherlands. So it's nice they keep up their know-how by doing it in Singapore.
Experience across the world, because every country is different, right?
Yeah.
If you compare in the Netherlands, Singapore, and Brazil, I mean, it's a whole world of difference. Talking about Brazil, Meike, where do you see the opportunities? We talked a little bit already about the challenges, but where do you see the opportunities, for example, because we're addressing also a little bit to our Dutch companies. We have many of the strong Dutch companies here in Brazil. Where do you see the opportunity?
I think, first of all, we need to recognize that Brazil is also a water country, and it has a very strong tradition of water management, of drinking water, of wastewater treatment. So I think when you work with Brazil, you really work with equals and with good engineers, with good professionals here as well. And I think that there is a lot of opportunities for companies in Brazil. I talked to some of our water companies actually last night as part of my program here. And I was actually really happy to see how upbeat they are about their opportunities. And I think some of the opportunities are with the big utilities, the water supply and sanitation utilities in Brazil. A company like Sabesp has always here in Sao Paulo has always been known for a very professional water utility. It now is an empresa mixta. They also have some private sector participation. And these kind of private sector involvements in the utilities make it easier for companies to work with those utilities. Because probably instead of very complex public procurement, they now can do better business, quicker business with these companies. So water tech companies, technology companies, some of the companies that make filters or pumps are very excited about that. But we also have our engineering consultants that I think work not only on water supply and sanitation, but also on river management, on climate adaptation, and also work very importantly with the agri-food sector, the agri-business sector, because you can't produce food without water, and good water management in a changing climate will also be very important in the agriculture sector.
Exactly. Well, I think it's a very nice invitation to probably many more Dutch companies. We would love to see many more coming our way here in Brazil. We still see now and then some hesitation from Dutch companies to make the big step to Brazil. So, but we're counting on you maybe to make it.
Yeah, I'll tell them, because I think there's a lot of opportunities here, a lot of business here. You can contribute a lot, and you also can learn for your operations elsewhere, and probably even use Brazil as a basis to work in the rest of Latin America.
Exactly. Well, we say always, when you can make it here, you can make it everywhere. It's not an easy country.
I thought it was the slogan of a different city, but I might be mistaken.
We stole it somewhere. But obviously, it's not so easy to do business here. But yeah, I think there are tons of opportunities in this country. So we would all be delighted to have more of them. The COP.
Yeah, this year we have the COP, which is bringing the world's eyes and attention to Brazil, and the COP's going to be held at a place that normally people don't travel to, which is the northern part of the country, the Amazon, which is really the water area. Although there's much water all throughout the country, but how do you think the COP being held in Brazil, how does that help raise awareness among other countries, among our country itself? How does that help bring the water issue to a closer attention to different stakeholders?
First of all, I think it's very good that the COP is in Brazil, because Brazil is really a country that deals with climate change in so many ways. No, we've been talking about adaptation and about water, but of course there's also huge challenges of climate mitigation, of CO2 here in the country. So I think it's fantastic that the COP is in Brazil, because they will be able to share knowledge and to show what climate change is all about. Water is an important topic in the COP. It has been for some years. It's really mainly on the adaptation side. What do you do with the effects of climate change? Because climate mitigation is CO2, but climate adaptation is H2O. In the past, when you read the newspaper, I'm always a little bit disappointed that you don't read that much about adaptation. It's always about CO2 or about financing. But we do a lot of work at the different COPs on adaptation. And this year in Belém at COP30, there will be a couple of very important topics also on the negotiation table. First of all, the indicators for the global goal on adaptation. How are we going in all countries in the world measure progress on adaptation? On mitigation, it's very simple. We have degrees of temperature and we have CO2, but in adaptation, it's a little bit everywhere, so it's much more complex. And we're going to look at how countries make their adaptation plans. In the Netherlands, we've just finished our national adaptation plan. Here in Sao Paulo, they've just done their state adaptation plan. And I think there's a lot we can learn from each other there as well. So water will be prominently on the agenda. And that's not so much the water sector. It's really because water is so important in all sectors.
Yeah.
It's crucial, as I said, in agriculture. It's crucial in urban development. It's crucial also for the energy transition. So water is in a lot of places in the COP, and I'm very happy that I also talking to the Brazilians, it will be very prominent in COP30.
That's great. We could talk for hours, huh?
Becky, on this
Absolutely.
subject.
Well, and she is also a bit of the COP specialist, because you've been participating in a few previous COPs already.
Yeah, there's people who've been to all of them. I'm not that old and I haven't gone that often. And COPs are important milestones, but I'm also somebody who likes implementation. So I'm not a COP specialist. I'm not a COP tiger, as the negotiators are called, but I've been to a few.
Yeah, and this COP is supposed to be really the COP of the action.
Yeah.
I mean, what if you compare a little bit? You've been to the previous COPs, not to all of them, but a few of the previous. But what is your expectation for this COP? How high is your expectation for this COP?
I think it's important to think of it as an implementation COP or an action COP. No, the big Paris agreement, the COP in Paris was 10 years ago. And some of the people who negotiate are actually in my team in the Dutch government. And one of them told me the other day, he said, yeah, we're nearly done negotiating because all the rules have now been established. We need to move to implementation. And I think that's something to realize because we think of these COPs as big negotiations and they will continue to be important. But making sure that we monitor the progress that each country is making, the progress on their national determined contributions, which is the promises you make to the world of how much CO2 you will reduce, what you're going to do. That's really why we need these gatherings and why we need to all keep each other to account. So my expectations are that we talk a lot about implementation. There's just
Status where we are.
paper, stock take, yes, indeed. And there's still a number of things that need to be negotiated, for instance, these indicators on adaptation. But we really need to show the world that we're serious about this and we're making progress. Maybe one thing on progress to say on top of it is you actually see that on the pathways of CO2, we're actually starting to make a change. It doesn't go fast enough. We need to go faster, but you see real action. It gives me a lot of hope. But what we also see is that even with lower CO2 emissions, the effects of climate change might even be bigger than these smart modelers have been predicting. So adaptation is urgent. Adaptation is now. That's where we also need implementation. And my visit to Puerto Alegre really showed that. Climate change is now, adaptation is now.
And it's now that we have to act. I see, anyways, Karin, a very passionate water envoy from the Netherlands and very hopeful as well for the COP, but also very positive on what we can do together. With this, Meike, I would like to thank you for stepping for a few minutes in our studio of the Orange Talks because your agenda is fully loaded. We know that, but we were very grateful that you would be with us, that we wanted to be with us today on the studio. So thank you very much. And please keep on doing the good work and the promotion of Brazil as well back in the Netherlands. Thank you very much, you as well, for listening to us and watching us. And stay tuned if you want to be COP connected. At that show. See you soon. Ciao, ciao.